As protests continue throughout the Mideast, new information this morning about the attack on America's Libyan embassy. Good morning. Welcome to the News Hub. I'm Rolf Winkler. Right away, Matt Bradley, Dow Jones' Matt Bradley, joins us from Cairo. Before we get to Matt, we want to share with you the names. The U.S. has identified the names of the 4 killed in the embassy attack in Libya. There was Ambassador Chris Stevens and State Department Information Officer Sean Smith we knew about. Also identified are Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty, both security personnel who were former Navy SEALs. Matt, good morning. Tell us, first of all, overnight now we've had some arrests in the Libya attack. And tell us, first of all, who was arrested and what's the latest we know about the attacks in Libya?
I'm not quite sure exactly about who was arrested in Libya. I know that it was 4 people that the U.S. has been following, and that the Americans have said that they are trying to follow along with the manhunt there, but they're taking kind of a backseat role, a low-key position, and leaving it mostly to the Libyan authorities, so as not to appear to be intervening too strongly in this episode.
Okay, and what's the latest as far as what we know? We now believe, the U.S. now believes it wasn't a premeditated attack on the embassy?
That's right. We have to remember that, of course, in Libya, the entire country is armed to the teeth. And so while it looked as though this massive effort was, or this very violent effort was a response to some al-Qaeda leaders calling for Muslims to avenge the death of al-Libi, who was a prominent al-Qaeda-affiliated sheikh in Libya, who was killed very recently. It looks as though this may have been more of a spontaneous reaction, more in line to the kind of thing that happened in Cairo, but far, far more violent.
Now, it's important that you mention that these appear to have been, it was more, well, I guess you say in your story, really, that it looked to be a militant group that may have assaulted the U.S. Embassy as opposed to a spontaneous mob, and in a sense that makes it easier for the United States to respond to it?
Are you referring to the U.S. Embassy in Egypt or the U.S. consulate in Benghazi in Libya?
The consulate in Benghazi in Libya.
Yeah, the consulate in Benghazi, if it wasn't an affiliate, if it wasn't just an uprising or a swelling anger, it would make it easy to pinpoint a specific group. And what's been going on is that, at least in Libya, it's very difficult to hash out where the fault lines fall between the different militias that have been kind of scattered after the effort to topple Gaddafi was successful. So the United States intelligence agencies are having to parse out which groups are more dangerous, which groups are more militant, and sort of recover from the aftermath of this successful effort to oust Muammar Gaddafi. There's a lot of weapons, a lot of militants, and many of them have ties to militant Islamist groups.
Matt, by the way, if you could pick up your phone, it was a bit of a dicey connection there. But let's continue. Now, you mentioned in your story, of course, that there's a lot of pressure on these nascent governments as they face really their first challenge on the international stage. Describe that challenge for them.
Well, of course, this is a difficult position, especially in Egypt, where you have a situation that didn't become quite as violent. In Libya, the population of Libya has really overwhelmingly expressed remorse for the death of the 4 U.S. diplomats. But in Egypt, it's a little more complicated. And Mohamed Morsi has tried to navigate some very perilous waters between using this to empower himself, to demonstrate that he has a robust foreign policy, a departure from his predecessor, Hosni Mubarak, who was very unpopular for seeming to cozy up to the United States for 30 years. He maintained the peace treaty with Israel and took a lot of U.S. funding and really towed the line when it came to U.S. foreign policy in the region. Now Mohamed Morsi wants to demonstrate that he has a robust foreign policy, something that's different from his predecessor, and at the same time he has to maintain what is a very important strategic relationship with the United States.
Matt, we're showing people on screen now a picture of Benghazi. You mentioned a second ago there have been peaceful protests in Libya in response, pro-U.S. anti-terrorism protests in Benghazi. Now, talk about it, but let's stay with Egypt for a moment. President Obama, he was on Telemundo yesterday, and he declined to describe Egypt as an ally, which that was an uncomfortable moment and sheds a light on a difficult situation for the U.S., doesn't it?
That's right, and Mohamed Morsi's people really took notice of that. The interview in Telemundo was on Wednesday, and Mohamed Morsi's people said that told me yesterday they were confused by this. They were kind of surprised by it and didn't really know how to handle it. The president, it looked like he had effectively downgraded the relationship with Egypt. Of course, the United States and Egypt don't have an alliance like the United States has with our NATO allies, but Egypt still benefits from $1.3 billion a year in U.S. military aid, which is the most that the U.S. gives to any other peaceful country other than Israel. So it's a very strong security alliance. And for President Obama to say on national television that this is not really, that Egypt is not really an ally was a shock to a lot of the Egyptian leadership. And so what we saw yesterday was something of a climb down. Morsi came out and said very strongly that that it was the responsibility of the Egyptian government to protect foreign embassies on its soil. He said that there was no justification for the attacks on the U.S. embassy in Cairo, and he made a pretty strong effort to try to repair some of the damage that had been frayed. But again, he really has been trying to play both sides against each other, pandering to a domestic audience that wants to see results, that wants to see the United States somewhat humiliated given this situation, and also to an international diplomatic audience from whom he's trying to get investment money. He's trying to get diplomatic prestige.
Okay, great. Matt, thank you very much this morning for joining us. And be sure, viewers, to check out Matt's story. There's an interesting side note here. Syria's Islamist rebels, for instance, are very worried that they're now not going to get Western help because of some of these demonstrations.